Hello and welcome to another episode of Casual Friday. I'm here with the Duck. The market moved, and we're going to talk about it. First question, Don. I would like to know whether you are delusional or acting in bad faith. Wonderful way to start the show, but I've got a tweet here, right? It's either like dumb, delusional, or I don't know what sort of adjective is appropriate. So you posted another tweet, right? Saying, after having made it to the top of the monthly leaderboard, I'm now going for the quarterly leaderboard. And this is the crucial part. The account is still small in size and leverage is still capped at 3x. Now, if you click on the screenshot, the P&L alone for that account is $300,000. So I'm really wondering what your worldview looks like if in your estimation 300k is a small account. So if you really truly believe that, then I think you're very wrong and it reaches the whole like dumb/delusional point. And the alternative isn't particularly charitable either, because then you know it's not a small account, but then you call it a small account to sort of make all your audience feel inferior and yourself be like, oh well, compared to what I trade, 300k, can people even live on that salary? So I'm just wondering how you form a worldview that's consistent with a good character where you talk down on a 300k account with P&L alone. And also, we're brought to you by Woo.
No, the reason why is because, if you look around, right, like the people on Twitter, and this might sound like be a shock to a lot of the audience, but like a bunch of the people that trade on Twitter actually trade with quite a big amount of size. So if you look at like, I don't know, like who's posted flex screenshots lately, Loma, for example, I think he posted like 700,000 or something, no, 500,000, I think, P&L. A screenshot. Loomda posted one just like 2 or 3 days ago with 700,000 P&L. So in comparison to like all of that, it's relatively small. I know that it's not little money, like it's quite a lot, but in comparison to the peers on the timeline, it's small still.
So your baseline for comparison is the outlier 0.5 to 1%. Okay. No, I just want to make that clear for the audience, right? I'm here sort of advocating for the plebs, being myself a pleb. And, there's something disjointed when you see 300k, again, not account size, but in P&L alone, and saying, lol, small, fun account, haha, if it goes to zero, fuck it. Here's a ref link, by the way, I just feel like we have to talk about it.
Yes, no, it's
if I put a gun to your head and asked, what do you think the average however defined sort of Woo or Binance trader has in their sort of margin or futures account, what do you think that number is? Because I think at best it's like a tenth of just that P&L alone. I think a lot of people are straight up trading with like 5, 10k. Maybe? Yeah. Like less than 10k. That's probably average, right? If we agree roughly there. And so calling like 50 times that small, I know it's not 50 times, but fuck maths. If you call it, if we can see that the average is 5 to 10k, and then 300, that's for the total account size, and then you have 300k in P&L, and you call that small, you can understand why there's reasonable room for pushback, right? And then you ask, why do you think that's small? It's like, oh, well, compared to the 0.1%, of course it's small, and then the whole thing goes out the window.
Yeah, but I'm obviously gonna compare myself to them, not to. Like I like to compare myself to the people that I like in the realms that I am in, right? Not necessarily like.
Oh, you're above us. I get it. You're too good for us. Is that what you're saying?
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying like I don't know. Like I'm just comparing myself to my peers basically, and those are my peers, right? They're like pretty much the same, like same kind of account, same kind of style, I guess, of like using Twitter. And in comparison to what like Gainsy's posted, for example, lately, it's little. But I know it's not little in general.
Okay, I'm glad we managed to get that out of you. Yes. To continue the character assassination, Don, I've got another tweet.
Oh, God. When does it
end? I just thought we got to start the show strong, right? So this is you tweeting sarcastically or ironically. It's such a privilege having an audience. I feel honored to represent all of you, and it inspires me every day, being able to put myself out there, #blessed, and push myself further. We're all in this universe together, and I get to share that with 500k followers, #privilege, right?
Yes.
And then I replied,
no one got the sarcasm.
No, they really didn't. I replied saying Casual Friday is going to be a doozy, and then you said Casual Friday is going to turn into a Violent Friday at this rate. So, Don, for someone who made a lot of money on this move, you sure are bitching a lot, right? And that seems somewhat at odds, like, with what you typically perceive, right? So people are on Twitter are claiming, "Oh, I like nailed all these moves," and they're really angry at every single egg Twitter reply guy. It certainly sort of raises questions as to how much money did you really make, or why are you so upset if you've really done so well. Whereas you seem to be a fan of having your cake and eating it. And I'm going to do well in the market, but by the way, every reply is going to trigger me, and I'm going to call you out and call you a piece of shit while making you feel worse subconsciously by saying that leaderboard account is also small. Get fucked. So, like, are you a bad person? What's going on?
I mean, most definitely that. I
Right.
mean, I'm a duck, Ducks are assholes always.
That's true.
But no, I don't know. Like that really doesn't have an impact on my mood too much. To be fair, like my mood is gonna be more affected by a bunch of people being idiots in my comments than having like a good few days.
Of course.
In
But
the
Twitter's
market.
been pissing you off, it seems. Or at least
Oh
there's
yeah,
some friction there, right?
I don't know. It's been getting worse and worse. And I think like a lot of people in my comments are like, "Oh, just block, just do this, do that." Like, but if you think about it, right? Like, if you go to a restaurant and someone in the back is always like shitting on his plate and throwing it around, like, yeah, cool. It's not the restaurant's fault, but still, I'm not gonna enjoy my time there, right? And no matter who you block or where you block, like even if you block people, they're gonna make secondary accounts and they're gonna get more angry, right? Like that's been my kind of my experience. So like once you have people that just fucking hate you, it just gets tiresome. And it's getting worse. And I mean, there's other people like me too, right? Like Kobe, for example, is not really hanging up on Twitter anymore because he's gotten so much shit lately that he's just like, fuck this, I just don't want to deal with this. And there's been a lot of other people too. So I think in general, like the Twitter atmosphere has become worse and worse over time. And right now, it's really fucking annoying. And I appreciate like people like I do know that most people are really nice and I do see those comments and I'm like happy to see them, but the human psyche works in a way where if you get like annoying shit thrown at you all the time, no matter how much good shit you get thrown at you, it's still gonna be annoying. So that's kind of why I've been annoyed in general, and it's not as easy as just like blocking people or just not looking at it. In my opinion anyway. So I've just been, and every time I vent, I feel a little better about it, and then I'm just like, okay, fuck it. Now I'm good again to get some hate comments.
Yeah, I'm doing this for your benefit, Don. Totally not an attack on your character and integrity. To be fair, I feel the same way. Like, even when I've complained about stuff on Twitter, it almost looks dishonest because the overwhelming majority of comments are positive. And then when you
Yes.
complain, even more positive comments come out. So you almost feel bad about complaining, but your
Yes.
mind fixates on the minority negative stuff as it is, which isn't great.
Yep.
Okay, that's all I've got for this week. Make sure to tweet more so we have more content like this coming into the next Casual Friday. Should we talk about the market, Don? Because I believe it has moved.
It
If
has
Twitter
moved.
is to be believed.
Yeah,
Everyone
let's
bought the
do it.
bottom, obviously. My
Oh, yeah.
timeline was super bullish when DOJ, SEC, Binance, CZ stuff was happening. Everyone was buying, so
The funny thing is, like, I'm usually like in exactly your camp. I'm like, this is so fucking annoying. Like, everyone's pretending to be like, everyone was like bearish, and then suddenly they have positions at the bottom. I was bearish as fuck.
yes.
I was bearish as fuck, and suddenly I had a position at not the bottom, but close enough. So it's a little bit hypocritical of me to comment on it. Then again, like for the people that actually watched the tweets that I sent out, the replies that I did, like I did tweet about longing just in a reply. But still, yeah, it's odd, right? Like everyone that's bearish suddenly has a position. Totally get that feeling. For some reason, this time it hit me. This is why I usually post my positions, um, even if I don't want to, because I don't want to deal with like when people ask you, like, did you long? And you actually did, but you didn't tweet about it. If you then say yes, which you just don't want to lie, right? Or you just ignore it. But then, like, I get like all my replies are basically, are you long? Are you long? Are you long? If I don't talk about it, which is also really fucking annoying to deal with, right? So you're kind of in this weird situation where like you don't want to talk about it, but also you kind of have to, and also like yeah, I don't know. It's odd. Like it's been an odd few days.
There's an easy fix to that though, Don. Like in my case, people have come to terms with the fact that I'm fucking useless, so nobody ever asks me about my positions or my trades for that week or whatever else. So what you need to do is to provide zero value, and then that problem goes away on its own. Source me. Trust me, bro.
No, just need to increase the shit posting and decrease the useful content.
Yes, correct.
As in the useful like positional content, because I would say your content is the best content you could technically have.
Yeah,
on
one
Twitter.
video every 6 months is a huge deal. I'm just a machine.
Yeah, but I
Don.
mean, like, there's one like YouTube channel or like one kind of piece of content that I appreciate, and it's when it's like one every couple months, but it's high quality, right? Everything else is garbage in my
Oh,
opinion.
so
I
Technical
hate.
Roundup is garbage? 4
Oh
shows a
yeah,
week? We're
completely,
trash.
completely garbage.
Captured by sponsors just pumping things out for metrics.
I mean, there's a reason why I say I'm surprised that anyone watches this shit. Whereas, like with your videos, I mean, it makes sense, right? Like you want to learn something, you check out your videos. That makes sense to me. It's high quality. This is just two dudes having fun, which I get the appeal, honestly. Like Casual Friday, I think that's the best show we make.
I think
just
so
because
too.
it's so casual.
Yeah, and there's some degree of authenticity of sort of my character assassination of you making fun of me, roasting each other, poking, prodding. I think that's pretty valuable in a space where you want to come across as infinitely flawless and wise, so people ape into your Telegram when you show them a low cap gem or something.
Oh
right?
yeah.
That said, do use our ref link, right? Wink, wink. We're not perfect. God, we've done like what is it? 11 minutes with zero market commentary on one of the biggest weekly moves. Should we at least approach the topic?
You doubted me when I said, "Why is anyone watching this shit?"
It's terrible. So the sentiment flip is enormous, right?
Oh,
to
yeah.
be clear, that's we touched on that early on. It literally we went from discussing will there ever be another cycle with main advocate for no being CryptoDonAlt. We went
Yes.
from that to we're going to 50k, new all-time highs are possible this year, etc., etc. So if we talk about the technicals of this move, let's do our normal sort of multi-time frame rundown.
Yes.
The monthly closes in a week, and this could end up being signal despite not being at one of the levels, right? Depending on how it closes, at least for my system. So if this, for example, just closes as a monthly engulfing, I think that'd be a pretty big deal. And by engulfing, I would mean a spike below previous month's low and a close above previous month's high. That's a pretty meaningful reversal structure. So even if it is in the middle of the range, sort of between the 20 and 35k levels, I think that would be good evidence of which of those levels is going to get tested first. That's at least how I view the monthly time frame. So if it sort of stays as this kind of engulfing breakout type of candle, I think the red candle that we have in the previous month is just going to be a new monthly cluster, and then you're still dealing with 35k as the earliest monthly resistance. But that to me would make the monthly time frame useful again as giving you some direction, some indication of direction. Because if we're at the midpoint, right? If 35 is the resistance and 20-ish is the support, and we're diddling in the middle, if you get a good signal in the middle, that can sort of, nudge you in the direction of which range boundary is going to get tested first. So I think if the monthly close as well, we have A, new monthly support-ish at 28 as a monthly cluster, and B, some indication that resistance is more likely to get tested than support. What do you think of that? Or is the monthly still noise until it reaches one of those?
No, I agree. In general, like, do you want to have some bull hopium?
Yes.
So if you look to the left to the COVID crash on the monthly, you had 2 candles up, 2 green candles after the crash, right? Then you had a red candle and you had 2 green candles up again. And for some reason, like when I look at that, it just looks very, very similar to what we're doing right now. Like that entire candle structure, it's a fractal meme. Basically like that kind of tiny monthly candle to the downside before the blast off. Now, obviously, I don't want to be shilling people. That's gonna happen again because I don't think it will. But it does look kind of similar, and the sentiment is actually quite similar too. It's just this time we don't necessarily have the same macro liquidity going around, but then again, like the S&P's been pushing, blah blah blah. But yeah, this is kind of I don't really see too many levels that I could trade on the monthly, but I'm like comparing the current state of it with that. I want to see how that tracks, if it tracks at all. Just based on kind of like the impact. I want to see what the impact of these BlackRock ETF news is gonna be going into next month. And so far, it looks pretty good to me.
Yeah, fair enough. That's the only thing I think that makes sense on the monthly. The only other question I have is there a chance that you do a classic DonAlt reversal on the monthly, where at 35k you say that it's resistance, it's a big level, then we get there, you're like, I don't think it's going to be a resistance, fucking
A
send it.
very, very good chance.
I can feel it from here, Don.
Very good chance. I mean, I am in position right now, and I'm gonna close like a bunch of it at 35, 34 point something. But that's like 10-15%, and the rest I want to see how we do if we get there. Just based on the fact how big these news are, and I mean, technically, like when you're looking at it, this level, right? Even though the structure is not as good as we had it in 2019, it's very similar to the 6K level, right? As in, like 35K is the range low. If you compare it to 6K, if we get there, we might just blast through and then go all the way to like 58K again.
And then back to
Before
30, according to the fractal, right?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised, honestly. That would be quite neat. So that's kind of what I'm watching. I'm not gonna be bearish if we hit 35K next month. Unless we close exactly at 35K, spike towards like 40, 45, and then drop back down again before the monthly closes, I will probably not be bearish on the monthly at 35K. I'll just wait and see, basically. I'm more than happy to just give it some time.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Nice to see the monthly time frame be relevant again. You know, that was sort of, it was relegated for some time. We were just stuck in the middle, but it's becoming interesting, which is good. I like that time frame.
It did kind of front run the supports a little bit. Like we talked about 23K support on the monthly, and it front ran that a little bit, but I think we would have hit that if not for the positive.
Yeah, we got BlackRocked, right? It was literally the day the Pico bottom was on the exact announcement. So
and if you're like wondering why this move was so swift, it's because like I think a lot of people were positioned in a way that would have made them get a better position lower down, as in like a bunch of people were betting on down, be that with shorts or be that with just not being in the market, and a lot of people got blindsided on this one. I'm pretty sure that's why we ran away so hard this month. Whenever you have good people, like good traders and good like whatever, good investors on the wrong side of the market, they usually reposition quite quickly because they have to. I mean, because I see a bunch of people like just they rate short these kind of news, and you just know that it's gonna go up. So yeah, I think that's kind of where this move came from, and I'm hoping we're gonna have a similar one next month. But yeah, we'll see.
I mean, it's literally forced buyers, right? Forced buyers from people having to buy their positions back, and also shorts getting liquidated. Both those who were betting on the drift and downtrend, but also those who kept shorting as the market broke out. I think out of all of those, the least acceptable trade was, I think, fading this thing early. Because you don't fade breaks from drift until it does something meaningful, right?
Yes.
So you don't fade the drift itself, as we discussed on Friday. But then we also, I think verbatim said, you get the type of, XRP-esque candle that wipes out months of downtrend in 1 week. I don't think we were expecting it to happen exactly in this fashion, but that's usually the outcome to drift. When the drift breaks, it's very violent. So if you step in front of it at the wrong time, that's when you can hear the ambulance in the background. So we're down to the weekly time frame now. Of course, as you mentioned, the 24K, which to me was the earliest weekly support, got front run, which is at least unfortunate from a technical point of view. The Wick Gang won this one, Don. They don't win very often, but on this occasion, it paid to pay attention to the tails instead of the bodies. You got to give them something, right? Broken clock is right twice a day, or however the expression goes. We're now at 30K, which sounds quite incredible to say, but we're right back at your dodgy indecision zone, right, which is comprised of the little green boy cluster, the little candle that could, and the summer range low at sort of 32, or the old range low at 32, 35, encroaching into that monthly area. This is purely technical. In technical terms, it's resistance, but is this one where unwilling to fade it because of just the magnitude of the move. Like in my mind, I'm looking at it in two ways. That yes, this is technical resistance, but I'm also totally not ruling out the chance that next week's candle looks just like this one. You know,
Yes.
that's sort of what's ruminating in the back of my mind, which is why I don't want to trade this with limit orders. So, like from a trading point of view, there are two conclusions that I have in my mind. You can tell me why both of them are wrong. One is I don't want to trade this with limit orders unless it's at a very sort of extreme price point. Certainly not for fading it. I think it's a wait and see type of thing. And second of all, I think if you get a good low time frame entry, it's worth holding it for a high time frame swing because there's at least a non-trivial chance that this kind of weekly break-in structure has some follow-through rather than no follow-through. So how are you sort of navigating the friction between multi-month downtrend reversed in one weekly, but that reversal then ends up in a sort of indecision area of resistance? Well, what's your kind of hierarchy of way of thinking about it?
I mean, if this is the reversal, right, you will have to have a candle that goes into this indecision zone, right? There's no way to go above it besides like going into it too. So like for me, looking at this, we tested the indecision zone before, that was in April. We got rejected there, and now we're just straight back to where we were. And like I was more than happy to fade it the first time around, especially given sentiment was like starting to just be like hilariously bullish again into that resistance. Like people were gambling on altcoins, people were like, oh, you're gambling on meme coins, all that kind of shit. So I was very, very eager to kind of like just sell into that move. Now I'm much less eager because one, I think sentiment is actually not even close to where it was back when it was here the first time. Second, this resistance has been tested before, so it's weaker now. And then third, this now looks like we had basically we had a consolidation at 16K, move up. Then we had a consolidation at 23K, and then we moved up. And now we had a consolidation roughly at 27K, and you could argue like, hey, this is just the same thing again, as in we're gonna probably just gonna do the same thing that we did back then. So for me, like I'm not gonna fade it. It's at resistance, but I'm giving it room. The good thing is, if it comes anywhere close to like 26, 27 again, I think then we know it's cooked. Just based on the fact that this is really, really big news, in my opinion. And when you fade really big news and you start bleeding out, then you get problems. We've had that before with, if you remember the China pump back in 19, like
One of the
October.
worst moves ever done, straight
Oh,
up.
horrendous! Like October of 19, right? That one weekly candle that went all the way back into the range low, and like that, like everyone was like, oh, China is gonna adopt whatever. That news is significantly less impactful, I think, than the one with BlackRock ETF. But that was like quite a big candle, and that bled out, right? And then you had complete horrendous price movements afterwards. And so if we do that, I think we're gonna make new lows below 24, as in like we will dip towards 20K. So there's an easy invalidation there, right? Like the moment we kind of go back to 27, 28, I think you can bid 20K and be happy with it. And that's what I'm going to do. Basically, I'm going to take profit on the trades that I'm in if we drop back down. And then I'm just going to rebid at 20K. But I don't think that's going to happen. But I'm prepared for it. Like if it does, if this is faded for whatever reason, I think we have big problems. But like I said, I'm very much not expecting it. And when I'm just looking at this, where would I rebuy if I sold now into resistance, right? Like where would I be looking for a re-entry? And the answer is like I have no idea. Like it's really, really tough. Like 28K maybe. But then again, if you go to 28K, you're really, really losing momentum of like a positive news event. So would I even want to buy 28K? So if this is actually bullish, I would not have a chance to rebuy if I sold now. And given my stance on the market is right now that it should be bullish, given that the news are how they are and the market structure is how it is. I wouldn't want to put myself in a position where I actually don't get a rebuy if I'm right. Like that just sounds horrendous to me. Like imagine you're right on the market, you sold because there's a resistance there, but you have no way to get back into that position if you're actually right, and that's stupid. And I've done that before. I'm not willing to do it again. Like I'm just gonna hold, take it all the way down, like take back 80% of this trade that I'm currently in, and I'm like, okay, just how it is. But the potential is so much greater than the risk that I'm taking there that I'm more than willing to give back all the profits.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the argument, in summary, ends up being some version of this presents non-trivial evidence or pretty good evidence of a medium time frame reversal. It looks like we broke market structure and broke trend on higher time frames. That's usually indicative of a move higher. By definition, those types of breaks will end up at some resistance level or other. But you weigh the odds of continuation through that resistance higher than the odds of that resistance doing something. And even if that resistance does something, the chances of you rebuying or getting a good re-entry if your larger idea is correct are sufficiently low or difficult such that you're willing to hold that position through a potentially tricky area. And in validation-wise, any loss of momentum, given how news-driven this is, sort of more than trivial shallow dips would raise an eyebrow, but you're willing to bet on continuation rather than that invalidation, right?
Yeah.
So some version of that.
And if this breaks out here, I mean, there's a way to trade this, right? Safely, and that is what I've been talking about for a while. Like I was like, you can just buy this above 35K and just don't take the risk. That's basically what my argument was when we were trading at 30.5K, right? That's the last time I sold. I was like, why would I risk all of my profit down from 16K for these 5K in between, right? Like this indecision zone, this 5K, I don't care about it. But now, like I sold and it went down and I got a good re-entry and we have like narrative support. And now I'm not willing to do that anymore because with this narrative support, I could see this thing teleport 10K in a week. And then I'm not going to get an entry on the weekly time frame, right? Like, what am I going to do and how am I going to get an entry if next week's candle closes at 41K? It's going to be tough. And then do I even want to buy, like, if it closes at 41K, do I even want to buy that there just to like trade it towards what, like 60K?
Oh,
that
I guess
seems
I've got
already
confirmation,
insane.
right?
Like that seems insane, right? Like buying 40K to aim for 60K, that seems completely insane to me in this kind of circumstance. So I'm just like, fuck it, I'll hold, I'll give back my profits if I'm wrong, and that's a good position to be in, I think.
Yeah, I think the colloquial version is essentially, I have a good entry, I have a strong thesis, I'm not going to overmanage this position.
Yes,
right. That's probably the most casual way
it's
to
how you
articulate
give.
it.
It's basically how you turn like a really good idea and a really good entry into like a scalp trade, which is gonna fuck you over. Because at the end of the day, like that's not the worst way to trade, right? Like if you're like, oh, we're at resistance, I'm just gonna close. As long as you're fine with missing out the move that comes after, because a lot of people trade this way, but then like completely panic because they were bullish. Originally, just wanted to have it a little bit lower to rebuy, and then it goes a shitload higher, and they're like just freaking the fuck out, and then they do some dumb shit. And I count myself into those people. As long as I have a good narrative. And right now I have a narrative, right? Usually I don't give a shit where this goes, but if I have like a really, really good reason to believe it's gonna go up, then I will be in that position, right? Like imagine not having a Bitcoin position if BlackRock ETF actually happens. Like that just seems insane. Like I don't want to be that person. So I'm just gonna hold. I'm gonna be the idiot that bought into news and held it even though it went up. But
I mean, in
we'll
the
see
bull
how it
market,
goes.
that was literally a free money strategy, right? So
Yes.
it's not. I mean, I know people look down on it, but like catalyst trading under the right conditions works very well in crypto.
Yes.
So it's not completely trivial. And also, the trading style you described is actually psychologically really fucking difficult to execute, right? Where you have a trade, you close at resistance, and you were bullish higher time frame, but you closed at resistance anyway because of EV or risk reward or whatever explanation, and then the market is up like 20% after you closed, or 10%, or just, you miss out on a large portion. It takes a really specific personality type to just be able to I guess, compartmentalize those trades and be like, well, that was setup number 1. I did the plus EV thing. Now it's moved 10%. I don't care. The price is the price. This is setup number 2, and I'm going to trade it separately. Like, it sounds great in theory, but it's actually very difficult to execute in practice. But it makes for amazing Twitter laughing, right? So I guess it's valuable. It's valuable in that regard. Like, I don't care what the price does, bro. I just scalp volatility both ways. It's like, I don't know, bro. That's, you know what it reminds me of, Don? And this is going completely tangential off the wire, but I guess that's why people watch this show. It's when, in the sort of political discourse space, this is quite US centric, but it sort of crept its way into the UK as well, where people say, oh, well, I'm not like a conservative or liberal. I criticize both sides. I'm like a radical centrist. Whereas in most cases, those are just like shitty conservatives in disguise. And their critique of the sort of left is scathing and conspiratorial and insane. And then when it's on the right, they'll do like the most milquetoast baseline criticism to just show like a tiny drop of good faith to support their idea that they're the most neutral arbiter in the world. Whereas in reality, there's very much a bias there, that these are conservatives in disguise. I noticed the same with a lot of traders on Twitter, where they're like, oh, bro, like both sides of the market, both directions, it's all about volatility, I don't care about the price. But if you look at their bullish scenarios, it's like, yeah, it might go up 5% into resistance, then it'll go down 20%. And then you look at their bearish scenarios, it's like, yeah, it's going to collapse 50% and the whole thing is fucked. And it's like, I don't know, it just feels like you're paying lip service to trading both sides and coming across as this omniscient being. But you've clearly got a directional bias baked into that fake neutrality a lot of the time, it feels like.
Oh, it's the most insufferable.
It's bad, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
and once you see it, you can't unsee it. By the way, like once you pick up on this, and you're like, okay, all of your bullish scenarios go up like 5% at most, and all of your bearish ones go down like 50%. It's like, I wonder what's going on here, you know?
Yeah. And the funny thing is like the opposite, right? Like if your bullish scenarios go up like 300%, your bearish goes down like 10-20%. It's stupid, but it's way less stupid, right? Because like you can actually make like 3x's, 4x's in this market, but you cannot. Like okay, it's gonna go down 90% after it's gone down 90%. I don't really see people making money on that regularly.
Yeah, that was like, last week's. For those interested, we had a long discussion on that.
Yep. So I think in general, like when and this is the last I'll say about it, when something's down 90%, right? Like if you short and enough people are interested in actually taking that short, you're gonna get squeezed out even if it goes down 90% after. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. But also, you know, the bull version of being guilty of this is essentially when the market's just down like 20% and you're calling it chop because it's not trending.
Oh, yes.
Right? So like the bulls are super guilty of this as well. But like, oh, it's just chopping. It's like your portfolio has halved. What do you mean it's chopping? In any case, we've covered 2 time frames in half an hour, Don. We're really good at this show.
Oh yeah, excellent. No, it's just to make sure we don't have to talk about the altcoin in the room.
That's true. Yes, correct. So yeah, that's the weekly time frame. I don't think there's anything else to add, right? Indecision, sure, you're skewed towards this breakout having legs. You have a good entry. You're willing to give it a chance. Giving it a chance means at least monthly resistance at 35k plus. You're not going to sell that blindly. Wait to see if that has any signals that you like or dislike. As far as invalidation goes, you're not too bothered given your entry is good, but you think you have a catalyst. But if momentum starts to go away, that's fuck it, basically. And even then, you'll only be giving back profits because the entry is good. It's roughly fair. Daily time frame. This kind of just blasted through everything, right? I think the only meaningful signal on the daily was the actual downtrend break. That was a big deal. And then the failed breakdown with the BlackRock stuff was also good. But looking at the daily now, there's nothing that I find particularly interesting. You could do the whole, looking at the consolidation at the top of April and just say, hey, look, we're trading that consolidation as a local range high / resistance. And I think that's fair for, short to maybe medium term trading. But in terms of like meaty daily resistances, all of that type of stuff, that's mostly gone, right? I think when you look at it from a daily or weekly market structure point of view, however you want to splice up this move, there's been a break in market structure. And as you mentioned, the breaks in market structure, because the market goes up, it'll always end up at some resistance in one form or another, be that a range high or some other high time frame level. But basically, as long as if it dips, it's fine, as long as it's not too much and doesn't give back too much of the momentum. I think that's at least my view on the daily.
Yep.
I think you're really kind of stuck at this point where your best hope is either that you do get like like the appropriate pullback, which means enough to give you an entry, but not enough to threaten the momentum. And then you basically have to take that on a sufficiently low time frame and then hold it for a higher time frame swing if you believe there's going to be a next leg. I really think that's really the only option on the table as far as positioning for more continuation, because anything much deeper or much more significant kind of threatens the entire I guess the way that this breakout took place, right? If the whole argument is going to be like it was in the past, that sidelined plus unwinding and all this type of momentum-driven stuff, you can't really go down that much without threatening the entire integrity of the trade idea. So then your only option really is to get stuck in on lower timeframes and hope you get something that isn't noise that you can hold through if you have a swing thesis. That's what makes sense to me. With the usual proviso that, yeah, if you want to short-term trade it, both directions, yada yada, that's fine. But the reason I sort of bring this up is because I know you hate this question, and I do as well. Like after you've called a move and it's happened, and then people say, well, "What would you do now if you weren't sidelined?" Right? It's like, well, I'm not sidelined for a fucking reason, right? Because I had a thesis. It's played out. Like this is the point where by definition, you do nothing. And so if you're asking me in a time where my whole idea is to do nothing, hey, do something, what should that something be? I can't answer that question, right?
Yep.
I mean, not in my case because I'm shit and only caught a small portion of this, but certainly it does make for a tricky type of discussion topic, because if your system is telling you that you've done the hard part and now you wait, and then someone else comes in and says, well, I didn't do that, what should I do now? The only information your system's giving you is to do nothing. So how can you then provide a meaningful answer to those people given that contradiction? And even then, as you mentioned on previous live streams, you're biased at that point. As impartial as you may want to be, if you've got a position running plus a higher time frame directional thesis to go with it, you might not be completely impartial as to what else you would want to see to get an entry. It's like, well, I don't want you to get an entry. You've got like a direct conflict of interest with the member of the audience at that point. It's like, oh, what would you do for an entry? It's like, nah, fuck you. I've got an entry. I hope this goes to infinity, So it just gets tricky on all parts. So how would you attempt to answer that question? If someone's, feels insufficiently exposed, or they listen to you say, BlackRock approved, and you don't have a position, they're feeling intense FOMO, what are some non-stupid things to do, or how do you address that?
Like it's impossible to answer. Like that's the problem, right? Like last week, when we talked, we're like, if you really don't have an idea, right? Just wait until the daily breaks 27.4, right? And the daily broke 27.4, closed at 28.2, which is a little bit of a bummer because that entry went away from that kind of from that support / resistance quite a bit, but that was the late or like the confirmation entry, right? And then the next day we still had a bunch of upside. Now, like we are technically at range high. We are technically at weekly resistance. We are technically very close to monthly resistance. So for me to kind of like shill you into a buy here would basically to be saying, fuck everything, like all resistances are gonna break. And I mean, I'm betting on it. But for me, that's a position much easier. Like that's much easier to say when I'm already in a position. Now, if you have like intense FOMO and you're gonna buy if this goes just another $500 higher, I mean, might be better to buy now than $500 higher, right? Because there's a good chance that if this is bearish, it's going to wipe out the top anyway, as in it's going to go towards like 31, 31.5 and then come down, right? So if you're going to buy 31.5, if this goes a little bit higher, buy now and save you some trouble, because if it's bearish, you're going to buy the top. And if it's bullish, I mean, you might as well buy here. But like anything beyond that is just really tough. Like giving advice there is like really tough. You kind of have to know if you're fine with like sitting this one out, or if you're fine with buying resistance, because every single option here is shit in my opinion. Yeah, it's just you have to kind of write down like, okay, would I be fine with missing the move? Would I not be fine? Is there a way for me to get an entry if this moves to the upside? I think if this runs, right, if this runs big time and breaks resistance and goes towards 40K, I think there's a chance we dip back to 35K, right? So if this is bullish, and you don't have a position right now, and you don't want to buy into weekly and monthly resistance, and you can wait that long, right? You can stand the FOMO when it actually starts running. I think that's probably the wisest choice. but I know that like everyone if I'm telling people like don't buy its resistance, it goes up, people are going to be angry at me.
Yes, there are no good
And
answers.
they're gonna buy at 40, 45K, even though, like I said, like buy the pullback towards 35 if
Right.
that does happen. So like I just don't think there's a good answer. I think the most reasonable choice at this point, like if you didn't buy it, basically the daily signal, is waiting for this thing to completely fully break out and then buy the first 20% down candle day that you get, because there's going to be one like 10,
Yeah.
20%. Whether that's going to pull back to 35 or like 32, 33, or maybe even we go all the way to 50 and then pull back to 40. That I don't know. But that's basically, I think, the best advice that I can give, which admittedly is very shitty advice. That's why you take positions when you actually still have a choice to make a good, like a good choice, right? Like when you have a good choice, you want to make like you want to take the positions. If you only have bad choices, it's usually not the time to take positions. One thing that I would say is that I would never short this. Like never in my life. I don't really see why like so many people are kind of so eager to short this. I don't really see the point. If you want to short this, I think you can do it basically with a close below 28K, and then you're gonna get a quick move. But I think that's almost always a bad trade from here on out.
Yeah, I think all of that is very reasonable. The only thing I would add is regarding the sort of FOMO and if there's a next leg, I want a piece of it, etc. Another option that you do have, I mean, I totally agree. There's very likely going to be a 10-15% sort of nuke day. It's a question of where it happens. That's quite tricky, but that day is going to happen. It always does in sort of uptrending structures, certainly in Bitcoin. The only other option that you have is, as I said, if you have a very good low time frame edge that you typically execute as a sort of intraday strategy, I would give yourself the leeway to hold it for longer than you ordinarily would, which is usually very bad advice, right? Like turning scalps into swings and swings into scalps usually loses money, and it's best to stick to the parameters of that strategy. But on this occasion, if in the back of your mind you're thinking there's a or there's like a sufficiently good chance that this thing runs beyond my usual low time frame parameters, if you get something that meets your rules on the lower time frame, it's worth keeping a chunk of it in case in case the higher time frame breakout view plays out. That's really the only other option. I mean, if you look at this on the 4 hour, tell me where the pullbacks are. Right, this is like a
I mean,
complete lockout trend, pretty much from where it broke out, and from a market structure point of view, and certainly from where the impulsive legs were coming. Unless you spotted it
and
very early around the BlackRock time and sort of your 25.8 whatever entry, and you were just willing to hold that past and through and into everything, then this thing just hasn't allowed you a way back. I think that only triggers the only other thing I want to say is when you have these types of breakout structures, as we've discussed on the show before and I've tweeted about, consolidation is a form of pullback. And you just have to fucking settle for that if you're going to get a lockout type of trend. So if you get like a good daily range or a good 4 hour range or a good hourly range, that might be the best you get if the higher time frame breakout view is correct. Don't know what you
yes.
think about any of that.
And I mean, the fact of the matter is, right? You just said like if you look in the 4 hour, there's no pullback. If you look at the S&P, it's down a bunch today, right? Like this is like the entire dynamic changed now, where basically we were weak no matter what the S&P did, and the S&P was just melting upwards, and that was because like just objectively we were getting completely like our ass handed to us, regulatory wise. Um, Now it's a little bit of a different story, right? Because now I think in my eyes anyway, like it's safe to touch this shit again, for like a lot of people that have a bunch of money, right? You're legit a laughing stock if you buy crypto into the SEC, just kind of like completely nuking the entire market. Like imagine explaining that to investors or to like a bunch of your peers, basically, if you're from the TradFi world or in general. Um, but the opposite is true if you're like someone that has been into crypto and people know that you're into crypto, and then you're gonna be asked like, hey, like what do you think about this BlackRock thing? Did you buy? And you're like, no, I didn't buy, like whatever. Like it just kind of turns the entire thing upside down, um, which I think can lead to these kind of moves, and leads to this kind of change in behavior, and significant enough to keep an eye on. The only problem is, and this is something that I've been talking about for quite a while, is that like it kind of sucks that we didn't get the move while the S&P was like lower. Now the S&P ran into resistance, and now we get the move, which does give this, like, if the S&P actually properly pulls back, we're gonna have a little bit of fighting to do, right? Because then you're gonna see this market drag a little, but maybe that'll lead to people shorting, right? You see the S&P be down 4%, crypto or especially Bitcoin dips like 5% as well, and people short the shit out of it, and then we just squeeze even more. I like, that's hard to say, but it's an interesting market again, which is quite nice because it's been really shit
I
before.
mean, it just drifted for like 8 weeks. It's just
Yeah.
drifting. So this is certainly a welcome development. My framework regarding the S&P correlation is basically that if you have enough momentum and short-term crypto sort of native flows, they can overcome a sort of correlation drag, but not forever. And also that applies within a certain sort of volatility threshold, which is just a fancy way of saying if the S&P really nukes, then now that's probably enough to stuff this to in a non-trivial way.
And this is, if this is actually bullish, right, that's going to be the pullback
Right.
that we talked about, the 10 to 20% pullback. Like if the S&P has like a 5% down day, while Bitcoin is trading at like 40 or 50K because it just went completely crazy into these kind of news, you bet your ass this thing is going to like completely crater and liquidate a bunch of like over eager bulls that were like bearish until we went to like whatever 35, 36K. They're like, ah, shit, I need to get a piece of this meat, so I'm gonna have to leverage up because I didn't buy it lower, and I need to make this and this amount of money. Always the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Like when people like, I missed the move and I want to make the money back that I would have made if I didn't, and then they just lever up. Like it's like the most ridiculous thing ever. But then you get these kind of massive pullback days, I think. So that's something to watch out for. And I think if you get that into like if crypto has strength here and actually does the breakout that I wanted to, and you get a nuke off of the S&P, I think that's a nuke that you want to be buying, because like I said, that's going to be a bunch of people hopping on short and waiting for the full blowdown, like full kind of collapse of this thing, which I don't think would happen at that point. So yeah.
That's all
We'll
very
see.
fair. It's almost like the sort of correlated pullback you get with alts, where if you don't have an entry, then BTC and ETH pull back. That's sort of the best you're going to get on a trending altcoin. In this
Yes.
case, crypto is the altcoin. If the S&P gives you a pullback, that
It
must
actually,
be
very,
sufficient.
yeah, I like that. I like that a
Why do you
lot.
sound surprised that I've said something that's like remotely interesting?
No, it's not remotely interesting. It's
How
actually
long have
really
we been
good.
doing this show, Don? Fucking hell.
No, but I mean, it's actually a really, really good comparison. Like, I really like that. Like, if think about Bitcoin trading like an altcoin right now, and then trade it that way. I think that's really, really good.
Wow, thanks. It's the nicest
So.
thing you've ever said to me on and off air.
Fuck off.
Let's talk about bearish things, Don,
Oh yeah.
because I think we've made the case for strength over the last sort of 47 minutes, which is essentially the monthly is forming and is yet to form, but close to forming a engulfing candle, which is suggesting that monthly resistance gets tested sooner than monthly support. The weekly wiped out the multi-month drift to the upside, and while that's ended up in an area of resistance, though if this sort of reversal and break of the drift is real, it normally doesn't stop at just one candle, right? It's usually a precursor to a move higher, especially given those monthly levels are higher as well. And the daily time frame, while reaching like a local extreme in the form of the range high at 30, has also just kind of broken the downtrend line, broken daily market structure, and is just very clearly impulsive move on the back of news that the market has started to bake in properly. So as far as the bearish stuff goes, I want to talk about the technicals plus the narrative fundamental stuff in terms of what could unwind this thing, how could it all go terribly wrong. We sort of touched on it with the S&P angle, where if that really pukes, then that's certainly something worth considering. I think we can overcome that in the short term, but if we get like a proper rotation lower, sort of Wall Street cheat sheet S&P crash, we're probably fucked. What other bearish things do you think would make you change your mind, both technically and fundamentally? Let's start with the technicals. So, for example, you mentioned that if it hit monthly resistance, you wouldn't be sort of outright bearish. You'd have to wait and see what it closes like. But I mean, I guess generally from a dynamic risk-reward point of view, the higher this pushes towards and into monthly resistance, the less attractive it is for sort of fresh positioning, right? Is that generally true? Okay, so I think that's the first thing. In terms of more local price action, as you mentioned, we're at the daily range high, however you want to define it, sort of 30K, right? 30.4, 30.2, just the top from April. If this breaks out and goes to say 31.5, 32, and then falls back within the range, sort of back below 30, like where it is now, basically. So you have another leg higher, it gets sold and it closes back within the range. Would you be willing to make a sort of failed breakout daily deviation type of argument, or is the higher time frame pull too strong?
Yeah, so that would have to be basically, we would have to have a breakout here. Then we would have to consolidate between 31 and 33K for a bunch of time. And then you would have to fall back down below 29K. As in, like, that would have to take like a week or two or three. Like, if we broke out here, went sideways, and then broke back down below 29K, I think that would be bearish, yes. But other than that, like, if, for example, if we have a breakout today and it goes to 32K and then it pulls back to 31 or 30, I would still not be bearish. Like, we've had this over and over again. Like, the SFP people have been trying to short left, right, and center every time we've taken anything, and they've just generally just not been making money. And it's been a good pull to kind of get people to short, and then you get a next leg. Like, you get a little bit of a reaction and you get the next leg. So that is not something that would make me bearish, but yeah.
So not just like a nothing burger spike. You'd want to see a real attempt to break out past 30K, that market go nowhere for some period of time, 1 to 2 weeks, and then aggressively fall back below 30K.
Yeah, that would be that would do it.
I think that's useful commentary, honestly.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing. Now, that's the breakout scenario. Now, in terms of sort of losing momentum, we sort of spoken about what could raise eyebrows on the upside. So hitting monthly resistance, generally, the closer we get towards that, the less attractive it is for fresh positioning. If we have a kind of fuckery SFP, but a real breakout that then really fails, that would also be bad. Now, in terms of sort of losing momentum and kind of bleeding out, what's the maximum acceptable level for this thing to retrace without reaching any of those levels? If it starts to drift lower from here, or if it does start to actually pull back or go down, where's the line, if there is one, between a sort of acceptable pullback versus, okay, this is given back way too much and it shouldn't be doing this if it's strong?
So closing below 28K on the daily would start looking bad to me. And that would be basically, I would probably de-risk into support, and I'm fine with that. Because at the end of the day, then my idea is invalidated and we are either in for chop or downside, or like in general, like I think this should have momentum. So if it doesn't have momentum, I'm going to be out. Even if it goes up afterwards, I can buy higher. Like, that's the cool thing about, like, if this pulls back and it goes to 27K, if it comes back to 30.1 and not 30.1, 31K, I think at that point you kind of have to get a position. Like, the third test of that resistance you would have to get. So I'd be down to sell 27, 28K and then rebuy 30, 31K, which sounds stupid, but it's just how I look at the market.
Okay. No, I think this is a very useful framework for the technicals, at least. A monthly resistance, dodgy. S&P turbo crashing, dodgy. Losing momentum below 28K, dodgy. Real breakout attempt through 30K that consolidates and fails, dodgy. Yeah. Cool. On the narrative / also leave a like, given we're such radical centrists who can consider both sides objectively, which is a super also, I'm just generally skeptical of people who say that, you know, they go, I don't hold any positions, I just criticize both sides. It's like, okay, so you're arguing for the status quo, correct? You're like supporting the incumbents by being against any type of significant change. In any case, not to do a politics, that's for 5 years, Don, when you know, we sort of pivot into, I don't know, politics. Reaction streams, something pathetic like that. As far as narrative and fundamental stuff goes, so we've kept saying the word BlackRock and ETF and institutional capital, whatever. I want to talk about invalidation for that idea. So some things that come to mind, and feel free to fire off on any of these as you see fit, but I've just got 4 on my list here, which is, and these are just random terms, so make of them what you will. Priced in, sell the news,
Priced in
ETF denial,
cringe.
and then fake buyers. And by fake buyers, I mean, for example, how in 2021 the whole argument was we've got institutional inflows and how this is going to be the year of the institutions, and the institutions are buying, and like crypto, like everyone's allocating to crypto, and MicroStrategy and Tesla are just the beginning before everyone puts it on their balance sheet, etc. Whereas in reality, those buyers didn't really come into the market, and it was mostly existing participants plus tourists rather, trading on that narrative in the absence of that narrative being real, right? So people were buying on the idea that there's going to be this institutional corporate balance sheet, whatever allocation. It wasn't really there, but buying is buying, and that narrative came from not the people who the narrative said would be buying, but the people speculating on the narrative, if that makes sense. I know that's super convoluted, but it's simply a question of, if like for example, let's say there's a China coin narrative, it almost doesn't matter whether people in China are buying or whether Americans are buying because they think people in China are going to be buying, because at the end of the day it's still buying, right? Yes. Except at some point it just kind of runs out and you realize that, hey, no one in China is buying, and it's all the same people left to unwind. So out of all of those, priced in, sell the news, ETF denial, fake buyers, or any others that come to mind, what would narrative invalidation look like?
I mean, we can walk through these real quick. So you go
Sure.
one by one, and I'll say what I think about it. So what was the first one again? Yeah. Yes. So like with the priced in thing, we had entire bull runs in Bitcoin that were basically based on we might get an ETF, right? So now that we have like a high chance of actually getting one, we're still trading at 30K, which is still more than 50% down from the highs. Like I think priced in is a little bit of an odd one, especially given that it's gonna be a while until it hits.
Yes.
You
Also,
can
sorry,
make
just very quickly, I don't know if I accidentally muted my mic. Don is responding to the four claims about how this ETF narrative it could be invalidated, and they are priced in, sell the news, denial, and fake buyers. So he's just responding to the priced in thing. I just mute and unmute my mic, so I don't know if I fucked it up. Anyway, continue. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So with the priced in thing, I think we can talk about that like in a month to 3 months. It's way too early, and you can see by the reaction that the market has had that it's very much not priced in, right? Enjoy your Coke, my friend.
Hey, that's why the mic gets muted, okay? The audience can hear that until you called me out. Screw you. Continue. I'm just enjoying the show as much as the audience. That's the whole point. Like, oh, Don's going to refute all 4 points of FUD. Let me crack open a cold one.
No, but I think it's too early for priced in. The next one was...
the next one, so priced in was the first one. The next one was sell the news.
Yeah, sell the news is fair enough, but then also in 3, 4, 5, 6 months, once we actually get an ETF, or if it's denied, you want to be the first one to sell. But why the fuck would we want to be selling right now? Something that I like to do whenever these kind of things happen is like I just talk with my family about it, because like they don't give a shit about crypto, right? All they know is that I do it, but they don't really give a shit. But they still usually know stuff just based on the fact that they one consume media. Like I have 2 brothers roughly the same age as me. They're online, right? And if something crazy happens in crypto, they will know. The ETF thing, no one knew, right? Like just a day ago, no one knew about any of it, which just basically, I think, means it's not really something that's retail driven of sorts. Like it is retail driven in parts, and that retail is basically the people that can never leave crypto Twitter. But I think other than that, like most people just don't even know about it. Besides like the bigger guys. So I don't think that's necessarily the case either. What's the third one?
Well, it's denial or delay, because we've seen that the odds of denial, if you have a delayed decision, increase quite a lot. But in any case, basically
Yes.
an unsuccessful bid.
I think that is valid. That's basically why, and I mean, I hate to say this, but we're gonna have to sit at our computers. Like, if this is a rally that sustains for a bit, and we're going up for the next month or two, once we get closer to the decision date, do you have it by chance? Like
It's not a
when?
fixed thing.
Yeah, but like roughly when they're gonna have
I think
to
the
either
average is like
delay it.
6 months. I think the average is
Yes,
6 months,
yes.
but there's like a big range. So
Yeah, but
yeah,
I think
a few
they're gonna
months at
have to.
least we have. Yeah.
I think they're gonna have to delay it in 45 days already.
I think if you're gonna make that type of, again, we're not lawyers. I'm not speaking on authority here, but
Yes.
if there's gonna be a delay, I think notice of that has to be given earlier. But I'm not
Yes.
100% sure. We're gonna get news in any case, right? That's sort of the
Yeah.
bigger theme.
So I don't think, like, if you just think about it, right? They have like, and I mean, this is something that I will look into, but it's so fresh that I haven't really. But I think it's like around 45 days that they have until they have to kind of like delay it if they want to delay it. So I think we still have at least 2 to 3 weeks of this narrative left, even if it's gonna get delayed. And like you said, if it gets delayed, it's more likely to be denied. But then again, like if you think about it, and I mean, I could be completely off base and completely wrong here, so take it with a grain of salt. But if you think about it, it's BlackRock, right? Their track record is insane on this. They only ever lost one application for an ETF. They're doing this in the face of basically the SEC trying to nuke crypto. Um, so if they didn't have a good reason to do it, I don't think they would. Just based on the fact how like toxic crypto has been, right? You don't touch garbage if you don't have a really, really good reason to do so. And I think that good reason is because they basically behind the scenes have most likely made some deals where they might actually just get through, right? Like, but that's just my opinion. I'm not a lawyer. I have no extra information. But I for just thinking logically, right? Why would you be touching crypto? Like crypto is a complete pile of shit right now, or was before this announcement. Basically, everything was blowing up. Binance was getting attacked left, right, and center. FTX went to zero, completely blew up. Everything went to shit, right? So why would they be touching crypto if they didn't have a good reason for it? That's kind of my line of thinking. I don't really see a good reason for it. Um, I don't think this is a political game. So I don't know. Like that's just kind of the way I think about it. So I think it's unlikely that it gets flat out denied. If anything, it gets delayed, and I think that's gonna be in a little bit of a more distant future. So I mean, if you have a month of insane up, and then we get then we get delayed and we dump, and I could see that be quite a big dump. Fair enough. Like that's perfect for me to trade it. But I
Yes.
think that's in the future.
And fake buyers, I assume you don't care.
Yeah, I mean the fake bias thing is cringe because someone's always buying, right? Like you said, like the price is going up and volume's been fucking sky high on
In the
Coinbase
US
and
session as well. That's some
yes.
2021 sort of positive. What's positive PTSD? I don't know. Sort of nice deja vu. I can't
Yeah.
relate, but that's what
Yeah.
we saw. It's kind of pretty good market structure when you have US session bid plus Coinbase premium. That's generally a good thing. At least when the
Yeah.
market's going up. Don't make me start my rant about spot premium when the market's dumping like 20% a day. I'll lose my mind. But I agree
Yeah.
with that.
And I think like when you generally like in general, like in hindsight now, and this is completely hindsight, and I was actually too late on this as well. But if you think about it, right, and this is something that I'm gonna take into consideration the next time we get something like this. When you have news like this that is quite significant, even if you think that it's not gonna lead to anything, it makes a lot of sense to take a position because you're gonna have a bunch of people basically speculating one on other people, jumping on that narrative, and two, like the narrative is gonna look like a million times better if the price goes up a little bit. So like if you have enough money, and there's a lot of people in crypto that have enough money, that even if you get like a fake narrative, like a bullshit kind of thing, but that makes like sense, a news event, whatever, I could see them buy. And I mean, this is just like colloquially like advice from me, whatever, to push this thing up a little bit, because then people will jump in, right? And then you can just sell whenever the fuck you want to. So like I in hindsight, and I'm like I said, I didn't buy the pico bottom of this. I bought into the rally, like literally had to buy into the rally. um I just kind of like a thing to look out for. Like if you get something significant enough, even if you think the market is cooked, I think it always makes sense to take that trade. I missed it. I had to buy higher, but I think it's something where you almost always win, and your risk is quite limited in that, and your upside is quite high, because if this turns into something, you have a position. If it turns into nothing, you can just sell. It's quite a nice kind of position to be in.
And your invalidation is basically your entry if you're quick enough on the news, anyway.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, that's fair. And I think the bull market, if anything, proves that narratives don't need to be credible in and of themselves to have really great price impact. Like fucking website redesigns, and the team is hosting a Twitter Spaces, like shit like that. You know, Elon tweeting, that stuff, given the right market conditions, can supercharge this thing. So it's not the case that the better the narrative, the better the price impact. It actually depends a lot on the regime you're in and the sort of underlying market structure. I know that sounds super vague, but regime, I mean, if you're trending up and there are just a lot of fresh buyers, they're going to be looking for reasons to buy, so even shit news can be a sufficiently good catalyst for a large move. In terms of the market structure, regime type of stuff, if you look at the drift we had, Vol was getting sold like nothing else, and there was also just a huge buildup of open interest on the way down, but also as the market was going up, you just kept seeing shorts pile in and get steamrolled. So there are other factors at play than good narrative equals a big price and weak narrative equals small price. That doesn't seem to be true. Cool. Yeah. Okay. I think it's nice still to walk through the technical and narrative invalidations. But that's really all I had to say on that.
Yeah.
Should we talk about ETH briefly, and then we can sort of pivot to altcoins as well? Your favorite topic to tweet about. As DonAlt.
People are so fucking upset at me every time. It's so odd. I don't get it.
Some of the arguments are so bad. As I was like, your name is Don. Okay, so I made a Twitter account like 7 years ago, and you're saying all of my views should be somehow bound to my username. It's like, what are you trying to argue?
And the username is genius, right? It's the most genius thing I've ever come up with like the Donald Duck,
Yes.
Donald, like it's like I don't know, like I found it genius. That's why I took it. It's not because like necessarily I was like, even back then I didn't like altcoins, right? I just like trading them, and I found the name really funny, and that's all there is to it. So people are like, you have to talk about.
I don't even understand. Like, do they understand what they're arguing? I don't know. It's some cringe form of like nominative determinism. Like, I'm CryptoCred, so if I don't tweet about only crypto, I'm making some sort of narrative violation. I don't even know where to go with that. As far as ETH goes, so may I remind you, DonAlt, that you were fudding the generational monthly support at 1678 ETH. And that was a fantastic pico bottom level. So I hope you apologize to all the monthly time frame chats.
I mean, I'm not going to enjoy it, because anyone that's bought ETH has been getting fucked.
Yes, true,
in comparison to like Bitcoin. Like if you look at the weekly time frame on ETH, it just looks like it wants to capitulate completely. On ETH BTC, ETH USD, obviously, like you said, like it ran into the monthly support and actually bounced. But it was still very much the wrong thing to buy.
Yes.
It's quite funny because I actually liked ETH BTC, but I didn't buy ETH because I didn't like Bitcoin. And then we got the news, and I was like, this is Bitcoin-centric news, so I'm definitely not going to buy ETH. That doesn't make any sense. And I was very wrong on the ETH BTC strength, but didn't really matter at the end of the day. Got bailed out by me not buying, because I was just like, this is Bitcoin-centric news. But yeah, on the ETH front, right? I think the monthly is like whatever. The weekly is interesting, given it's all the way back at 1900. Fucking hell.
I don't get why people speculate on the price of ETH. We've solved it. One ETH is worth 1900. Like, can the market be any clearer about that? I don't know. Yeah, we're back. We're back, Don, at the failed breakout, to fail to break down, to fail to break out level. That's how you know you belong in a mental institution.
Yeah, I think that's like if Bitcoin breaks out, it's going to break out too. But if Bitcoin breaks down, it's going to break down horrendously at this point.
I mean, EBTC is literally in free fall at the moment.
Yeah, so
which is like hashtag bottom things, but like it actually looks pretty bad.
Yeah,
it does take a certain breed of overthinking to think, okay, finally we have a good catalyst. It's about as Bitcoin specific as it gets, so I'm just going to buy ETH.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
you
don't
can do
know.
that later. We even sort of made the argument in the newsletter that if this thing continues to have legs for the weeks and months to come, we expect those profits and risks to rotate down eventually. But if your immediate reaction among having seen a Bitcoin ETF is to buy ETH, you might just be overthinking things. It's just...
You're not overthinking, you're underthinking.
I
You're
guess
fucking
you're
retard.
I'm trying to be charitable here, okay? But yeah, that makes sense. I did FUD this lower high on ETH, if you recall, Don. I made $0
Yes, I
off
do.
of it, but that was sort of generational entry there. But ETH BTC
Yeah.
looks bad. That looks breakdown E. And ETH USD, it's up against 1900, but presumably the argument is the same as last week. Where do you remember? It's like, oh, it's so bearish, it looks awful, but if it stops being bearish, it actually looks really bullish towards 2500. I
Yep.
assume that hasn't changed on the USD.
No, it hasn't changed. I still think like given how the market looks right now and how ETH BTC looks, there's a chance this breaks out and there's a chance it goes to 2.5k. There's a chance that Bitcoin doubles in that time, which should basically mean that you lose like, I don't know, like 50% almost against Bitcoin. And not 50%, but like 40 or 30% against Bitcoin. And that's not something I'm willing to take. So I don't think ETH, like I look at the ETH USD chart and it's a not bad one, right? It just needs a little bit more to be quite bullish, but it's gonna be bullish because Bitcoin is going up. And this is the thing, and this is something that I had to argue in my comments as well. Like people don't understand how dumb my comments are lately, but someone was like, when I was making the comment that this is going to be bad for altcoins, people are like, you said altcoin USDs would go down, but they're going up. And I'm like, this is not what I'm saying. Like, if I'm saying like Bitcoin up and this is bad for altcoins, what I mean is that obviously the Bitcoin pairs on the altcoins will go down. So you should just be owning Bitcoin. I don't think there's been a time for more than like a day where Bitcoin's gone up, where altcoins don't go up in USD terms. It's just they're weaker, right? And they're quite significantly so right now. If you look at Bitcoin dominance, for example, and I fucking hate that chart. I think it's completely stupid. And the reason why I think it's stupid is because it's in favor of like it needs to go to zero basically, because you have stable coins. The more interest there is in this market, the bigger the amount of stablecoin market cap there will be, as in the closer this goes to zero. And there's also like altcoin inflation, all that kind of shit. So technically Bitcoin dominance should be trending down aggressively over its lifetime, right? Just based on the fact that you have a bunch of altcoins in there and you can just make infinites. And if you just have like, they might still have a market cap of like 50 million, 100 million, those like shitty altcoins, but they don't have any liquidity at all, but they still count, right? And to make 1 million of those makes Bitcoin dominance chart quite useless. But even in the face of all of that, the Bitcoin dominance chart's been completely gigamooning. So you can kind of see that, like, because I've also been getting comments that like altcoins are actually doing really well, and I just don't know how people are measuring that, right? Like I fail to see how that makes any sense. Like, yes, some select few altcoins are going up, and that will continue to be the case, but most are not. And in all of that, like, because we talked about ETH, I think that's just gonna, like, ETH's probably gonna bleed out further. But I still think if you want to buy altcoins, ETH's probably one of the better ones. It's just, why would we want to be buying altcoins into like this kind of massive Bitcoin centric narrative?
Especially early, right? I think with the passage of time, that argument becomes more tenable. That okay, the profits might rotate, and maybe there's some sort of catch-up play available. But in general, catch-up plays like underperform and lose money. I don't know how many more market cycles we need to have people trying to make it up with catch-up plays before they realize it's a mostly psychological phenomenon. They just feel bad that they missed out on the first mover and are trying to make up for it rather than just going to where the strength is. Usually, the strong stuff keeps being strong, and it's strong for a reason. The weak stuff keeps being weak because it's weak for a reason. And there's like a small window of time where that doesn't apply and it changes. But on average, you'd be better off just being long the strong stuff and weak and short the weak stuff, or just ignoring the weak stuff. And I can't believe that's a controversial thing to say, but hey ho, radical centrist, right? Both sides are bad. As far as ETH BTC goes, are there technical levels where you're like, okay, I'm gonna at least keep eyes peeled for a bounce or not a catch up, but like some form of relative strength. I think 5.7 is the weekly range low,
Yeah.
0.57 on the weekly. That's attractive. But at the moment, or if maybe if this low gets mega SFP'd at 62s or something, although it doesn't look super likely at the moment.
Mm.
But in general, I feel like it's still quite early to be considering rotation plays if you're positioning for strength. But is there
Yeah.
anything? What would be a sufficient? I mean, I think we've established that the passage of time generally favors that. But is there anything else that would make you think, okay, I'm gonna jump around essentially?
Um, right now, I'm just like, if you remember, like in the last couple of weeks, I've always talked about that I want to see this kind of this lower high, lower low situation change that we've had, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, this is gonna be it. Like 3 weeks ago, I was like, oh, finally we're gonna make, like, most likely gonna make a new high, and then you can actually start being bullish this thing again. And we closed just barely below the previous high, as in like in June compared to April. And I want to see that change. I want to see us break that high, or I want to see us dump 20% in relative
Okay.
terms. Like 20-30% in relative terms, I'd be down to buy that dump. I think at that point, you'd be crazy not to. That's a huge discount, and ETH is like has significant narratives of its own. But other than that, I'm just gonna wait and see. I'm not gonna buy any level. I think this, like I said, this narrative is so Bitcoin centric that it could just basically make this range that we're currently in on ETH BTC look like a distributive one. I don't think it's gonna necessarily be one, but I think, like, imagine we broke below 0.057, the attitude towards ETH would radically change, and people would start panic selling and converting into Bitcoin. And I think at that point you get discounts. So either that or we just break the highs.
Yeah. So weekly
I think
market structure or capitulation, right?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think both of those are cool. I wouldn't mind either, really. Obviously, given I have Bitcoin exposure right now and nothing else, I would prefer the altcoins to nuke, because then I can buy them cheaper. Because I like a few narratives that I can see on the altcoins, especially if Bitcoin goes up, right? Because then you're gonna have a bunch of new money come in.
If you say
Um,
XRP, Don, I swear to God.
no, no, no. I'm done with XRP. I'm done with Litecoin. I still like Litecoin, still performing better than other stuff, but I'm done with both of those
So
because
Pepe.
I think that's one of the ones that is gonna be interesting. But I don't know if it's not, like, I'm probably not gonna buy it because
Shill
I
us your
don't like it.
narrative altcoins, Don.
No.
Okay, great.
I'm gonna buy
Great.
first
Thanks
this
for watching.
time.
Hope you guys enjoy the radical transparency on Casual Friday, I guess. Fuck
Yes,
me.
I'm gonna give you the radical transparency after I bought, because Dogecoin, if you guys remember, almost broke my complete mental status when I bought it at like 15 sats, and then got front ran by the entirety of everyone that was watching, and it went to fucking 1,000 after. And I could have retired 10 times over if I just kept that position, but or like got the full position anyway. I didn't. I've learned from my mistake. I'm not going
I
to do
heard
it
you're going to
again.
share your gems with people who sign up with our ref link. Confirm or deny?
Oh yeah, yeah, of course,
Totally,
always.
totally.
Uh,
Okay,
the
fair
the
enough.
the ref link enjoyers are gonna hear it first.
They're gonna be eating like kings, yeah. So it's gonna be the Don classic, right? You know, I saw this one comment which I found hilarious on one of your live streams, where some guy is like, every time I open up the Don live stream, it's him circling the bottom where he bought and the top where he sold. It's gonna be the same with this altcoin. Like, yeah, I bought this altcoin at the low and then I sold it here, and then it's like down 20% from where you sold and up 50%. That's gonna be fun.
But
Maybe you can
the
tell
thing
me
that
after the
frustrates
show what those altcoins are, and I'll just leak them on my alt account, which I use to antagonize you and run psyops on your mentions. That'll be a good one.
No, the thing is, like, about that, like, it frustrates me a little bit, because I've been like as transparent, I feel like, as I can. Like, I've actually like tweeted about almost every single buy that I've done, right? So it's always funny when I hear this, because people are like, it makes it sound like I'm just like, hey, I bought here, I sold here, in hindsight, right? But it's actually not been hindsight. I've just had a good run,
Yeah, your
and that's
Twitter's
gonna,
been really transparent, to be fair.
yeah, and I mean, that's gonna end, right? Like, if people don't realize this is something that always happens on, especially on crypto Twitter, when people start running hot. Like, people copy trade, people just take their words for gospel. Um, and then the inevitable dry spell hits, right? Like where you just completely you don't hit anything.
I know a lot about dry spells.
Jesus. Anyway, and then it's like they're like falling out with the heroes, right? But it's just how trading works, right? You have good times, and what I do, what I try to do is lean into those good times, right? And then when I start like losing money left, right, and center, I just start like going like less risking barely anything, trying to kind of get my groove back. And once I have it, I start going harder again. So there's going to be a time where I'm going to be hilariously wrong again. Happens all the time, really. Like I said, with ETH BTC, I thought it was going to go up. It didn't. I just got lucky that I didn't have a position because of the Bitcoin centric news. There's been like a bunch of stuff that I've been wrong on. So don't take my word for gospel. I think it's the wrong way to look at markets or to trade in general. Like if you're just trading based off of someone else, I don't think that's a good way to do it.
The issue is with the hot streaks, when people hit them, they think they've sort of cracked trading, and this is how it's always supposed to be. Like I figured it out, not realizing that you've probably, something just like it's an isolated period of time where you're super fortunate that all your edges are working out and lining up with the regime that the market's in, and your mental is good, whatever it may be. But that's not a permanent state by any means. So most of the losses come from people where that regime changes or the edge dissipates or whatever else, but they think that it should always be there, so they try to force it when it's no longer working and end up giving back 20, 30, 50, 80, 100+% of what they made. I think streaks are like completely normal because the market is a moving dynamic thing. Which is why you have to lean into it when you have a good streak and then learn to back away very quickly once it changes instead of trying to force the issue. It's not like supposed to be a static thing. Like, okay, I figured out trading. This is what my returns are going to look like indefinitely.
Oh yeah, if you think you figured out trading ever, sell everything, withdraw your money, give it to your mom to safe keep it, because I've seen too many people be like that.
Oh, for
honestly,
sure.
like this is like the peak bull market thing, or like most of the time it's bull market, but bears actually do this in the bear market too. And then oftentimes, like in the bull market, like and we have friends that work like this, right? Ran their accounts to multi-millions and then literally zero, or oftentimes they just took on debt on top and just gave back everything. So
it's not great.
It's not great. Just very, very important to kind of just know that there is no solving the market, and there is always just basically probabilities. And you're gonna have good times, you're gonna have bad times, but as long as you can kind of make the good times count and limit the bad times, there's a way to make some money there. But it's not like there's at any point in time gonna be you just cracking the code, or you feeling like, if you feel like you've cracked the code, it's more likely that you're in the wrong headspace.
Yes.
In my opinion, anyway.
And it stands to reason, because if you model most people's lifetime P&L, there's going to be a large disproportionate amount of it made in a very short time period, right? I think that's true, especially for crypto. So then how from that could you then infer that you always have an edge and you should always trade in the same way? It doesn't stand to reason at all. So that's one way to look at it, and sort of one heuristic to navigate through that. But agreed there. Any other altcoins, or I think you'll shill them after you've bought the bottom and sold the top. But for the time being, I think the overarching argument is bigger picture. If this narrative is sticky, we're still in the early-ish innings as far as Bitcoin dominance goes. So until that changes, alts, even if they're up in USD and have days or periods of outperformance, are pressured by this sort of concentration of a single narrative around a single asset. I think that's reasonably fair to say. And also ETH BTC either capitulate or break market structure to make it attractive. And I think that would track for alts as well, to be honest. You can get a pretty good altcoin risk-on signal from a ETH BTC risk-on signal. I think that's going to be relevant once again. Cool. I think we can coast through some news. I'm conscious of the time. I haven't got that much this week, which is good. Let me frustrate everyone by opening it this way.
I love it. Makes me happy every time I read the comment.
So good,
I'm like, oh, it's so good.
Crypto exchanges should phase out internal market makers, says BitMEX boss. An article published by the Financial Times this week raised questions about internal trading teams at Crypto.com. BitMEX, once crypto's largest derivatives exchange, also has an internal trading team that previously operated as a market maker but now acts as a treasury desk, according to CEO Stefan Lutz. It's a transition Lutz sees as natural for all exchange firms in a market richer in institutional liquidity providers. I think that's right. but I can also understand why it's sort of a tricky question, because for a lot of these exchanges, it's very hard to just onboard market makers if you're not making revenue in the first place, and it's that migration isn't particularly straightforward. I think sort of morally, ethically, and probably legally, if like it's easiest not to have internal market makers. It presents an obvious conflict of interest. As we've seen in the past with other exchanges, it's never just an internal market maker, right? They have a lot of the time have preferential access, preferential information. They're not effectively siloed from the exchange business and operate on terms that are probably negative sum for their customers. I mean, we obviously have a direct conflict of interest in talking about this market because WooX at the time of recording is still rather single market maker dominant, although that's being phased out with fee revamp, etc. So, I mean, if you want to dismiss our views on this, feel free. But I generally think, especially if this whole so-called institutional liquidity argument, whatever, is going to pick up, and I also just think in general, crypto market structure is much more sophisticated now than it was in 2017, 18, 19 sort of BitMEX era. It's becoming increasingly accessible to source liquidity without having to resort to internal market makers and sort of that type of deal. So I think the less of it, the better. I can understand the time and place for it, at least in early crypto days when that was just quite rare and market structure was a bit green behind the ears and young, so to speak. But I think with the passage of time and as the tech improves and the sophistication of participants improves, this really just shouldn't be a thing. Or at least if you're going to bootstrap it, there should be a very sort of clear and aggressive, I guess, de-risking of sorts, where you should be able to track the dominance and that it should sort of go down over time and be effectively siloed in the most reasonable, transparent way. What do you think? Is this a necessary evil or a relic of the past?
No, it needs to go eventually anyway. It also a little bit depends on how it's basically run, right? Like if you have an internal market maker that actually does the markets and does the trades, one thing. Like if you're running a B book, for example, like that's fucked up, right? And there's a bunch of exchanges that I feel like I don't have any proof, but that I feel like run a B book, as in like they just take the orders basically. They take like you start like you sell, you buy, whatever, and most people are not profitable, right, in markets. So what a lot of these, and this is like a forex problem more so than like a crypto problem, but I feel like we have a couple in crypto as well, where it's basically they take your trades, they don't ever execute them, and this is the exchanges without an order book. Most like predominantly, there's a few that have been chilled on crypto Twitter that I would assume in Minecraft that run like the books. Basically, they take your trades and they know that most likely you're going to lose. So they don't even have to execute the trade anywhere. They just take your trade and they over a large amount like over the more people trade there, basically the more money they make because they're just kind of betting against their customers. They're not actually executing anything. And that's the really fucked up thing. And I'm surprised that like people actually work with exchanges where this could even be like inferred. As in like if you don't have an order book, like that's very, very shady. In my mind anyway. But yeah, coming back to that topic of like internal market makers, I think it should go because I mean there's probably internal market makers that are doing stuff legitimately, right? That don't run your stops, that don't like have advantaged data, but the fact that they could is just not a good thing, right? It
Correct.
should.
Yes. That's the whole point of conflict of interest, right? You don't need to demonstrate that that's actually going on. It's the fact that it could go on that is in itself problematic.
Yes.
And also, you just have to almost take their word for it. So, the crypto.com, for example, was under fire in this article. And, so was sort of BitMEX's past. And there's always the same party line that, oh, we're just like providing liquidity. It's not a source of revenue. We don't take on any deltas. But like, you can't demonstrate that, right? You can't prove it. And so you just have to take their word for it. And hence the obvious conflict of interest. I mean, even in a lot of the CFTC, SEC, whatever, Binance allegations about internal trading desks and stuff, it seems to be rife in the place, even in venues with a ton of liquidity. But I think just the obvious conflict of interest, plus the fact that, as we know with Alameda and FTX, it has been abused. There is large scale precedent for it means the less of it, I think, the better. And if you're going to do it, it better be like a very short term, as transparent as reasonably possible, bootstrapping minimum necessary amount before you phase it out as aggressively as possible.
Yes. And the thing is, and this is something that irritates me a lot, is that a lot of the kind of like internal market making stuff actually goes on without the bigger exchanges letting anyone know about it. Like you do see a bunch of like market maker-ish behavior, and you do see a lot of the exchanges kind of like rewarding you to come and deposit your newly minted first like shit coins or like
Yes,
some kind of
like
like
the Arbitrum airdrop, for example, right?
yes,
Sort of
exactly.
incentive programs.
And then you're getting paid for it, and you're wondering like why the fuck, like what like why is this useful to them in general?
Yes.
And when you think about that for a while, you kind of get to conclusions that most people wouldn't like.
Yes.
But it's just how crypto works. But I think the more legit it gets, the better. But I always find it funny when people are like shit talking like exchanges or like in general, like people in the space that do stuff with like an open book. They talk about what they do. They talk about like how they do it. And then they're praising like these people that's just on Twitter and they're shit talking a bunch um, about everyone that basically says what they're doing, and then they're like praising the ones that kind of do the same thing just behind closed doors. So that's like a big problem that we have in crypto, and I think it's gonna go away over time, especially given the the kind of scrutiny that we've been under. I think like in the next 2 years, the internal market maker is probably gonna disappear.
Yeah, good riddance. And again, obvious conflict of interest there, but I think that the point you made tracks pretty well to Woo, where they're transparent about the quote unquote ugly side or the controversial side of the business model, whereas a lot of other centralized exchanges have that, if not worse, but they're just not transparent about it. So you basically incur a reputational penalty for being transparent about something that's ubiquitous, but you're the only one talking about it in a public way. But again, feel free to dismiss that completely, given that's the show's sponsor. So I don't blame you for that. Valkyrie joins race for spot Bitcoin ETF with Wednesday SEC filing. I've seen some commentary basically suggest that we're going to have like a barrage of good news with more filings, and that's going to be sort of good for the market. I disagree. I don't give much weight to these sort of previously failed copycat filings. I think it's really sort of BlackRock or nothing, or at least BlackRock will set the bar for whether future ETFs and products of that nature will be approved. And I think with every other bit of ETF type news, the benefit, if any, is going to be incremental. I think BlackRock is just like the big important one to focus on, and all this copycat tailgating behavior, I don't think that makes for like additional catalyst / new narrative market impact. I just think it's they're essentially making the argument we're making that hey, BlackRock's pretty well connected, they're going for it, maybe we can piggyback and launch our own product if they set a precedent for success. But I don't think it's the case that now we're in a good news only regime and this news is as important or sort of somehow comparable to the BlackRock one, so you can just keep longing every exchange, ETF, whatever announcement. I really think BlackRock is like 99% of it and everything else is noise in comparison.
Yeah. Something that I do want to mention is because this is something I talked about, like when we're talking about Bitcoin. I was like, if you want to buy now, like if you're gonna FOMO buy at 31.5K, because it goes up, it's better buy now. Like well, if you just look at Bitcoin price, that has kind of played out already. So sad that this isn't live.
The show really likes casual. I mean, the market likes Casual Friday.
Oh yeah, it does.
I just need to bring back altcoin Thursdays now. If you want to dip, we're talking about how difficult it is to get position. Just let me cook. Let me cook on Thursday.
Oh yeah, but no, I agree with you. It's BlackRock basically. It's the one man show.
Look at us just simping the biggest asset manager in the world.
Oh, I mean, I hate it. I absolutely fucking hate it. Like this is something that I think people should be not really too happy about. But price go up, so it's good.
Exactly. I'm glad we agree on that much. GBTC trading volume spikes 400% after BlackRock files for Bitcoin ETF, and I think there was some convergence on that spread as well.
Yeah, there were some rumors going around basically that I don't know who was gonna buy up GBTC.
I think they're saying Fidelity or something.
I think so.
But
yeah,
I think that argument is so trite, isn't it? Like if they were going to if we're going to establish a precedent for a spot Bitcoin ETF, rather than, I mean, yes, sort of a Grayscale has a ton of AUM. They've also got a ton of legal problems, and that whole entity
Yes.
is like super dodgy. I think if BlackRock sets the precedent, and you're someone like Fidelity who can just do it on their own, you don't need to buy out this weirdly distressed conglomerate
I
to
do
do it.
agree. And why would you?
Why would
Like,
you?
why would you help people to get out of the position? If anything, you buy it and you keep it as is.
Yes,
And then you
yes.
just keep milking the people in it.
It's an infinite fee generating machine.
Yeah, I think if anything, like GPTC has to get out of the situation by basically being allowed to get out of the situation by
Converting to an ETF.
converting to an ETF. It's
That's
the
the
only way
argument,
out.
right? That's really the argument for
Yeah.
this trade is essentially. Oh well,
But why would they?
Go on.
Like that, when you think about it, why would they? They're making a shitload of money in fees. They have money problems anyway. Like the longer this goes on, and I mean, it's very obvious that people do have appetite to buy it, right? Like you just
Yes.
need a few news like this, and then like the more GPTCs out there, the more fees they generate. They have money problems anyway. If they convert it into an ETF, especially if BlackRock has one too, why the fuck would anyone like? I mean, it's the same, right? Like
I agree.
I don't know, like. There's a world in which they actually get greenlit, but in general, like the GPTC thing is an interesting one, and given the legal trouble, I am probably not going to touch
Gemini
it.
Earn, Genesis, all that type of stuff. I actually think, and this is mega cynical, that their entire push to convert to an ETF is almost entirely performative, and
Yes,
there's no real appetite for that.
Why would they? Yeah, exactly. Like in my opinion, like there's no real
no
reason.
incentive.
Like
yeah.
the moment they do it, they lose a bunch of fees.
Yes.
Because
imagine you were trapped in GBTC all this time, you can finally get out. What are you going to do? Be like, oh, I guess I'll just stay here now. I was supposed to go into, a superior product like BlackRock.
Yeah,
or
you
something.
would like
like you'd be insane.
You'd obviously just sell it and then move it to the BlackRock
Yes.
ETF. And I don't think there's a world in which GBTC gets to have an ETF before BlackRock does, if BlackRock applies for one. Like
Yes.
there's just no world. So it's kind of like they have very little incentive to do so, other than reputational. But given that they have money problems, and their reputation is completely shit anyway, I have troubles with this.
Yeah.
But I could be completely wrong, and there's some upside there, right? It's still trading at like what, like a 30% discount, 40%. But honestly, if I wanted to capture that 30-40%, and I thought it was gonna get close, I'd probably just long Bitcoin on leverage. I feel like the risk is lower there.
It's the classic, how can I
sounds.
outperform Bitcoin with buying anything but Bitcoin type of brain, which is scary. Crypto Sleuth, the Zach XBT, sued for defamation. So let's be careful with our words here, Don, given there appear to be litigious parties involved in this. But I think it raises an interesting point. And I saw Taylor from my MetaMask tweet about this. Sorry if I've butchered either her name or her affiliation. But she essentially said crypto is set up such that sort of good faith, on average, good faith actors will get much more scrutiny and sort of criticism and risk than bad faith actors in the crypto space. It's like the way the incentives are set up are just so perverse and perverted that sort of acting in bad faith and sort of, acting in a way that is sort of directly supports your own financial interests, potentially at the expense of others, the cost of that is likely lower than someone who sort of tries to shed light on that. And the trade-off then ends up being completely gross. It's either like, well, I can just act in bad faith and earn a bunch of money and not suffer any consequences, or I can, on average, try to shine a light on this type of thing and then actually suffer more consequences and more scrutiny than the people who I think in that case are acting in bad faith, in my personal subjective opinion, in that hypothetical, right? And that's just not great for the ecosystem, I think, because it incentivizes, it takes away all the incentives to sort of for accountability and adds all the incentives for self-enrichment, potentially at the expense of others. And that's just not great. Yeah, so I mean, it's nice that people came around and raised money for this type of stuff. I know Zach also gets criticism, but I think it's a very odd type of criticism where essentially like I've seen the argument made for sort of selective enforcement that, he never sort of investigates his friends and he just goes after like a specific type of group of people. I just don't see much I didn't find the argument to be particularly persuasive. Because I think the clearer argument is that the investigations, many of which have had law enforcement kind of get involved and sort of restitution for people who've been hacked and tracking these things with exchanges and freezing funds, I'm quite comfortable making the argument that, especially given the absence of super clear financial incentives to do so, and mostly being sort of crowdfunded with some rare exceptions, I'm quite comfortable arguing that Zach is a pretty clear net good for the space, right? And a rare exception in that case, and at the expense of his own health and safety and well-being. And so then to consider that and then go and say, well, I'm going to criticize you for not enforcing, using your discretion, which is completely voluntary, in a way that I would find more agreeable, is just a very odd fucking argument to make. To use an absurd example, it's like if you had some fucking superhero, and I'm not saying Zach is a fucking superhero. I mean, maybe you think that, but again, I know that would get like some weird criticism. But let's just say, for analogy's sake, you have a superhero who just, mostly self-funded and, performs sort of acts of justice at their own risk and well-being, and then you criticize them for, you're not going after this bad guy, you're only going after those bad guys. It's just a very odd, I think, morally shaky argument to make, that somehow because you're not enforcing in the way that they would like you to in every case, that somehow you're like a net bad, or that's a valid criticism on balance. That was a bit mushy because I'm trying to be careful with my wording, but I don't know what you think of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's anyone that argues that he's a net negative for the space is complete and utter idiot, in my opinion. All of the stuff that's going on that he's shed light on, that reduces the risk of this happening again. Now, it will never go away. It's crypto after all, right? But a bunch of people that would have turned crook, most likely decided otherwise after seeing people go to like jail or go like be prosecuted due to Zach's actions, right? And he's doing this, and like what people don't realize, because I commented being like, I mean, he's just doing this, and now like basically this lawsuit, right? And this is what I find the saddest about this entire thing, is basically doxing him to the world, right? And that puts him, because let's be real, like he's fighting people that have one, more money than he does, and two, people that have very odd moral compass, to say the least, right? Like these are people that, I mean, I don't want to say they're like breaking the law, whatever, but they're willing to at least work in the gray, right? That's something that everyone can agree on, that he's kind of like going after. And in a lot of cases, they broke the law. That's why the law enforcements are going after them.
Yes.
Right. So these are shady people with very shitty morals. And this lawsuit is doxing Zach, right? So like it's putting him in danger. And whether this lawsuit is like something that is justified or not, I think given we are like a pretty small family in crypto, there's other ways to handle this whole like ordeal than going basically to Papa, like to your like to Papa State to kind of have it fixed for you.
Yes.
Using lawyers and using a bunch of money. Like I think that's just a very embarrassing thing to do for someone in crypto. Right? That's just so anti-crypto that I'm honestly shocked that this is like even something anyone would consider, right? Like if someone's tracking your wallet and posts it publicly, which is the whole fucking like, I mean, that's what crypto is for, right? That you can see this stuff, right? Like that you can see this the transaction, that you like, it's a blockchain, right? And if someone comes and is like kind of like talking about what you did on chain, and you go out and sue them for it, I think that's just like as anti-crypto as it gets.
Mm-hmm.
And it should get much more scrutiny than it does get, and it's getting a shitload. Like the outcry has been large, but I think a lot of people underestimate how shit of a situation this is for Zach.
Yes.
And we're friends, like Zach and I, like been chatting quite a bit over the years, and
you're just doing that so he doesn't investigate you, Don. You want to be in that special privileged friendship group.
Yes, that's the only reason. Yeah. And like it's hard for him. Like he's struggling with this, obviously, right? And not only him, but like this is like shit for everyone around him too. So like while I like see that a lot of people are like, yeah, let's support Zach, I think the outcry even consider it is very loud, it's still too little. And I do kind of think that everyone that hasn't supported him, that feels like it's important to kind of keep this space to a little bit of a higher standard than we have it, should go to his profile on Twitter and like give him something. I've donated, and I will probably do it again. He's told me that this kind of lawsuit, because a bunch of people have been talking, oh, he has so much money already, because he's gotten, I think, like roughly $1 million in donations. He's been told by his lawyers that it's gonna be at least that, more likely much more.
But also, he said quite clearly that any leftover funds would be returned to contributors on a pro rata basis.
Yes.
So this isn't some long con self-enrichment scheme. Although if it were,
No.
that would be amazing. I would love that. That's such a good story. But I
Yeah.
don't think it's likely. Also,
No.
hot take, Don. I don't think the outcome of the lawsuit matters because the damage has already been done in the doxing.
Yes, I mean
That's the worst part. So the chilling effect that this. So basically, the outcome is that if you try to keep imperfectly sure the crypto space accountable, that it will come at a great personal cost to you and those around you.
Yeah.
And that's a pretty awful precedent to set, and it's already done. That's the thing. Regardless of win or lose, the fact that he's been doxxed and he's been posting sort of threats he's been getting, that's it. It's over. He loses even if he wins, and that's pretty rough.
And the saddest part about all of this, right? And this is why, like like he said he's gonna give back the money, and I 100% believe him. But I wish he didn't, right? Like I wish he could just keep it, because even if he got like I mean this doxing and this risk that he's put under is like, that's such a huge expense to his personal just safety and well-being, that I don't think that donation, like even if this entire lawsuit was dropped, I think that would barely cover it. So I don't know, like it's a really shit situation, and he's a good guy, and doesn't deserve it in my opinion. Like, yeah, this is just a shit behavior, and very sad to see it. And yeah, the damage been done, like you said. Because at the end of the day, like now you have to, like, if he keeps on doing this, all props to him, right? Because I don't know if I would. Because I mean, your name's out there, people are gonna like be shit as usual, especially given you're basically going after international criminals, right? Most of the time anyway. Not everyone. I don't know. I don't I don't want to get sued as well. Not into that kind of shit, because it's just a big headache, right? So it's kind of, I don't know. I'm very saddened to see it, and I think everyone that feels like supporting the space to move to something that is better than what we have right now should kind of consider donating. And like I said, he's been told, and I do believe that this is true, that this is going to be like at least $1 million, if not more, kind of process. So if you think like, like he's made so much, he doesn't need any help, this is going to be expensive if this goes through. So yeah.
But now that we've been nice to him, when we scam with our meme coin, hopefully we'll be okay, whether out of good faith or because he's backed off of doing this type of stuff. So that's great. Also, just a casual reminder that like less than a month ago, influencers were straight up dumping meme coins on your head, and it was happening all over Twitter. Low cap gems, meme coins, fresh stuff, and it was completely fine. And we've forgotten all about it because first the market dumped and we had Binance news to distract us, and now we've got BlackRock ETF stuff. But that's something that actually happened.
Yes. Anyone that launched a fucking meme coin during that time, you should just report and block. Like I just legit don't understand how people excuse this shit behavior every single time. I do not understand it. Like legit drives me mad.
Well, it's because there's no cost for it, right? That's why. Well, first of all, it becomes normalized because more and more people do it. And more people do it because the punishment for doing so almost doesn't exist, at least in the short term. And the incentives to make money are very high and sort of very palatable in the short term. I think that's why, right? When you have copycat behavior plus lack of enforcement, you're going to get this type of behavior to propagate.
Yeah, I mean, I get why people are doing it. I just don't get why people still follow them. I don't get why they're not completely stoned to death every time they show their head now. Like every time they poke their head on Twitter, like poke their head out, they should get stones thrown at them.
But short-term memory doesn't exist. That's
like,
the issue.
Like people are like in the comments of them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it's just a misstep," or like, "It's okay.
It's just one trade,
still
bro."
believe in you. Like I'm like, what the fuck? Like this is obviously a morally corrupt person. Why the fuck do you still like? crawl into their ass. I do not understand
Because
it.
it's because there's nothing disqualifying on crypto Twitter. That's what I've
Fair
learned
enough.
over the last,
Yes.
6 years. I really thought there'd be some sort of, I don't know, almost honor system or reputational premium, but that's every year that gets completely invalidated.
Yeah.
Yeah, fuck it. Last bit of news. It's been a very long show. If you've enjoyed this, leave us a like on the video, leave us a comment. Hopefully this is helpful, and we always love chatting to you guys. We read all the comments, so thank you for the support on the channel. Tether did back USDT with Chinese securities, documents show. So you remember when this
Yes, I do.
NIWAG thing came out, showing what their sort of the construction of their portfolio was, like at a snapshot. And it turns out at some point, they did have. I mean, this is when the market was speculating that they were like all in on Evergrande, and that it was going to go to zero, and so was Tether. So they did hold Chinese commercial paper. I don't think they do anymore, and this is obviously a snapshot from the past. And now Tether has since removed all commercial paper from the backing of USDT, the company claims, and they mega printed in this high interest rates environment, right? Like they've got so much money, they don't know what to do with it anymore. They're just like buying Bitcoin, and they're up on that, I think, as well.
Yeah, they are.
So this is just continuing the theme that you're, again, no stablecoin is perfect, and there's always stablecoin risk. And if you're afraid, you've got a bunch of choices. You can swap around, do whatever. But like out of all of them, it seems the most battle tested one in the most adverse conditions. Every single turn, swerve, whatever, Tether has survived it all. Basically,
Yep.
It's even sort of on average depegged less than bloody USDC, which lost I think $3 billion in Silicon Valley Bank. There was a leaked screenshot today before they got bailed out. So yeah, it's just this prevailing theme that Tether has always been the crypto bogeyman from literally from 2017, if not before. Like the only reason the crypto market goes up, or the only reason it exists, is Tether, and Tether is the big bogeyman. And you had FTX, and then Binance is next to collapse, and then it's Tether, and it's always Tether, Tether, Tether. And then crypto over the last 2 years, everything blew up except Tether. And it just seems like and again, there is plenty of room for reasonable criticism of Tether, certainly in its past, the weird Polish money being seized thing, the whole we're going to get audited, never get audited, sure, Chinese commercial paper. But it seems like they've done well what a lot of crypto businesses have tried to do, where you operate shady first because the regulatory environment is hard, and then you clean up once you become rich and successful. It just feels like they've done that really fucking well, whereas most other protocols, exchanges, institutions in crypto are still in bankruptcy proceedings. So it's a very, in relative terms, a very weird. I mean, you should always keep some degree of skepticism, but it's a very weird bogeyman to focus on, certainly in the middle of 2023.
Yeah, I think they have so little reason now. And this is the thing with a lot of younger crypto businesses back in the day, right? They did shit that wasn't really 100% legit, and then they made so much money that didn't have to anymore. There's even, and this is very funny to me, during 2017-18, I know for a fact there was an exchange that was set up to be a scam exchange, as in they want to get as many people trading there as possible and then just literally steal their funds. Then all season came around, and they made so much volume and so much more money than they ever thought they could. They were just like, why would we be scamming? We're making so much money. We're just gonna keep it going. I don't know if they rug pulled in the end, but a friend of mine went over this and told me the story, and I found it quite funny. They just basically were like, we're making so much money running this as an exchange. We're actually just not gonna
too rich to scam,
people.
the new James Bond.
Yeah, or not even too rich, but they were just like, if we scam, we're gonna make in 2 weeks we're gonna make more in fees than it's just business wise it would just be bad. 100% this exchange doesn't exist anymore, just based on the fact that people like that don't make it for too long. But yeah, I found that funny, and I think that's true for a lot of crypto projects that turned out scooting the law, that if they've been around long enough and they made money, and this is a very small pool nowadays because most stuff just kind of loses money, but if they've been around long enough and they make money, they're probably not going to do things illegally anymore. I think this is the same why Binance, basically everything, whenever you get Binance news that are negative, it's all about 2018.
Yes.
There's a reason for this. They made so much money in 2018 and cleaned up their act so much, in my opinion anyway. Because back then I got a lot of this rumored shit as well, right? I saw I had a bunch of friends working in Binance, and they're like, I mean, wild, just the Wild West basically, and it's very different now. So I think that's basically how it goes in the space, or went. I don't think it's gonna go this way again. I think it's too big now. As in, like anything that launches now cannot afford this anymore, because the space is basically in the scopes. Like you'd be stupid to do the same thing nowadays, because basically every regulator is looking at it.
Agreed, Don. Agreed. Well, with the market up almost 5%, I think it's a good place to call it.
Yep.
Quite a long show. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you've listened this whole way, thank you. Leave us a like, leave us a comment. As always, show is brought to you by Woo. Check them out in the description. Read the long form article. If Don can get on the leaderboard, anyone can, except me. You know, I hide my account to make him feel less bad or something. In any case, they support the show, so feel free to support them if it makes sense for you. That's all from us. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next week for the normal deluge of content and hopefully non-depressing prices. Goodbye.